Hey folks, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving headfirst into the silent, invisible war that's threatening to reshape the entire tech world as we know it. Forget the latest GPU specs or smartphone camera comparisons for a moment. I want to talk about the nexus of geopolitics, energy, and manufacturing that is the 2026 global chip manufacturing war. We're seeing a perfect storm. An energy crisis in the Strait of Hormuz is threatening to suffocate Asian chip production, while the US and China are locked in an escalating battle for technological supremacy. At the heart of this storm is one small island, Taiwan, and one giant American company now caught in the middle, Intel. Let's get into it. We're going to break down 5 critical fronts in this quiet conflict, starting with the most immediate and least understood threat. When you think about the world's most critical piece of infrastructure for your smartphone or AI data center, you probably picture a gleaming, sterile clean room. You don't picture a narrow, 21-mile-wide waterway between Iran and Oman, but you should. We rely heavily on the Strait of Hormuz for oil, but its role in the semiconductor supply chain is arguably even more critical. It's the primary artery for 2 things modern chip fabs absolutely cannot live without: liquefied natural gas, LNG, and helium. With the strait effectively closed following recent conflicts, we're facing a dual threat. Manufacturing advanced chips is incredibly energy intensive, and Asian foundries are heavily dependent on LNG-fired power. For Taiwan specifically, a staggering 97% of its energy is imported, with natural gas accounting for around 43% of its electricity generation. Here is the terrifying math. According to a Morgan Stanley report, Taiwan has only an estimated 11-day strategic reserve of LNG on land, an 11-day buffer for the factory that prints 90% of the world's most advanced logic chips. If that buffer runs out and a fab experiences even a millisecond of power instability, it's not just a temporary shutdown. You could lose entire batches of multi-million-dollar wafers instantly, and restarting a complex 3-nanometer or 2-nanometer process could take weeks. But the crisis doesn't end with electricity. The closure has also taken Qatar's Ras Laffan facility offline, which is responsible for roughly 1/3 of the world's helium production. Helium is an irreplaceable golden gas in chip manufacturing, used for cooling in EUV lithography and etching processes. Countries like South Korea, which sourced 64.7% of its helium directly from Qatar in 2025, have almost no short-term alternative. This is a devastating 1-2 punch for the Asian chip-making giants. This energy vulnerability spotlights a terrifying concentration of risk that has been decades in the making. We didn't just happen to put most of our advanced chip manufacturing on a geopolitically sensitive island heavily dependent on foreign energy. We actively built the entire AI revolution on this single point of failure. TSMC alone commands a 74% share of the global foundry market by revenue, dominating the manufacturing of everything from NVIDIA's AI GPUs to Apple's iPhone processors. Its backup power systems are legendary, but they run on diesel, LNG, or grid power, all subject to the same supply chain disruptions. The concern isn't just about the Strait of Hormuz, it's also about the equally tense, if currently quieter, waters of the Taiwan Strait. The global chip industry has long been aware that a direct conflict or blockade around Taiwan would cause an economic crisis that would make 2008 look mild. A confidential 2022 industry report warned it would trigger the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. And yet, despite years of warnings from Washington, Silicon Valley companies were often too focused on short-term margins and speed to change their supply chains. The current energy crisis is proving just how right those warnings were. Now let's pan out to the broader context, an escalating US-China war over technology dominance that's consuming everything in its path. The US strategy is straightforward: strangle China's ability to produce advanced semiconductors. The latest legislative vehicle for this is the proposed Match Act in Congress, a sweeping bill designed to stop not only the sale of cutting-edge chip-making equipment to China, but also to ban American companies from even servicing equipment already sold. This would target specific Chinese fabs like SMIC and Changshin Memory Technologies, YMTC, while also placing country-wide restrictions on advanced tools like ASML's DUV immersion lithography machines. Unsurprisingly, Beijing has warned this would severely disrupt global supply chains that extend far beyond the US-China trade corridor. However, here's the twist that makes this a war, not a surrender. Far from collapsing under sanctions, China's domestic chip industry is showing remarkable resilience. Historically, U.S. export controls were meant to slow China down. Instead, they've supercharged a drive for self-sufficiency. By early 2026, SMIC has managed to achieve high-volume production of a 5-nanometer class process node, N+3, using clever multi-patterning on older DUV machines. While yields are estimated to be much lower than TSMC's, the Chinese government is heavily subsidizing this inefficiency as a matter of national security over short-term profit. As a result, NVIDIA's once dominant 90% share of the Chinese AI chip market has now been cut nearly in half by domestic rivals like Huawei's Ascend series. This brings us to the final piece of the puzzle: the race to build a viable alternative outside of Asia, and the company at the center of that race, Intel. For Washington, breaking the world's addiction to TSMC means betting big on a domestic champion. Intel is that champion. The U.S. CHIPS Act has evolved from a simple subsidy package into a deep, structural bailout and integration operation. Recently, the U.S. government converted its $10.9 billion CHIPS Act grant into a direct 9.9% equity stake in Intel, making it essentially the largest shareholder. But there are strings attached. As part of the agreement, Intel is legally forbidden from spinning off or selling a majority stake in its foundry unit, guaranteeing that advanced U.S. manufacturing assets remain under American control. The strategy is playing out in real time. Intel's 18A process node has been delayed to late 2026, but it remains the West's best chance to secure a leading-edge chip supply chain. Intel is no longer just competing on raw performance against TSMC. It's selling a geopolitical moat, the promise of a secure, disruption-proof supply chain for hyperscalers like Google and Microsoft. So, what does this all add up to? We are witnessing nothing less than the slow, high-stakes fracturing of the global semiconductor industry. On one side, you have the US-led effort anchored by Intel, buoyed by massive government investment and tethered to allied nations. On the other, you have a China-led ecosystem racing to close the technology gap with an all-of-the-above national strategy. Yet caught in the crossfire is the existing king, Taiwan's TSMC, which currently supplies everyone but is now dangerously exposed to an energy and geopolitical hurricane. History shows the chip industry is cyclical, but its center of gravity shifting due to an energy blockade and a flat-out technology war is something new. The $1 trillion semiconductor world is dividing into two spheres, and the decisions made in the next 12 months will literally determine the architecture of our digital future. That's the state of the chip manufacturing war right now. It's not just about who has the smallest transistors, but about who controls the seas, the power grid, and the equipment supply. If you made it this far, you're clearly a true nerd for this stuff. Drop a silicon sovereign in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming breakdown of Intel's 18A versus TSMC's 2 nanometers in the months ahead. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.